Jake Morrison sat in the back row of the biggest classroom he had ever seen. The room was shaped like a bowl, with seats going down toward a stage at the bottom. But these were not normal seats. Some were filled with water for species that needed to swim. Others glowed with heat for creatures that came from hot worlds. A few seats floated in the air, held up by some technology. Jake did not understand. He looked around at the other students. To his left sat a being made of what looked like purple crystal. Light passed through its body and came out in rainbow colors. To his right was a creature that stood 8 feet tall, with gray scales and 4 arms. It wrote notes with 2 hands, while the other 2 hands rested on the desk. Jake was 23 years old and very far from home. Earth was months away. Even with the fastest ships humans had built, he was one of only 3 humans at the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies, the most important school in this part of the universe. 200 alien students filled the lecture hall, and Jake felt very small among them. His hands were sweating. He wiped them on his pants and looked down at his tablet. The small device translated everything the teacher said into English. But sometimes, the ideas were hard to follow. Philosophy had always interested Jake back on Earth, but alien philosophy was different in ways he had not expected. Lisa Park sat 3 rows down from him. She was also from Earth, studying medicine and biology. Next to her was Ben Hughes, who wanted to learn about alien engineering. The 3 humans tried to sit together when they could, but today the classroom had been too crowded when Jake arrived. The lights dimmed slightly. A door at the bottom of the lecture hall opened, and Professor Velnoth walked onto the stage. He was a Krell, one of the oldest species in the Galactic Council. His scales were dark green and looked thick, like armor. His 4 arms moved with careful grace as he set down his materials. 2 small eyes sat above a wide mouth, and when he spoke, his voice was deep and slow. "Good morning, students," the professor said. The words came through Jake's translator a moment later. "Today we continue our study of the universal ethics doctrine. This framework has guided our civilizations for 1,000 years. It has brought peace where there was war. It has brought order where there was chaos." Jake started taking notes. The universal ethics doctrine was something every species in the galaxy seemed to know about, except humans. In his 5 months at the Institute, he had heard it mentioned in almost every class. The basic idea was simple. Every being had a place in the universe, and happiness came from accepting that place. Professor Velnoth brought up a hologram in the air above the stage. It showed a timeline stretching back thousands of years. "Let us examine how different species came to understand this truth," he said. The Vexari, for instance. The crystal being next to Jake seemed to sit up straighter, though it was hard to tell with a creature made of living glass. The Vexari were once divided into many groups that fought constantly. Their world nearly destroyed itself in wars over resources and territory. But then their greatest thinkers realized something important. They understood that each Vexari was born with a specific purpose. Some were meant to lead, others were meant to build, still others were meant to serve. When they accepted this natural order and stopped fighting against it, their civilization advanced rapidly. Within 300 years, they reached the stars. The hologram changed to show a different world, one with red skies and 2 suns. The Krell had a similar awakening, Professor Velnoth continued, and Jake noticed pride in his voice. "My own people spent centuries in brutal wars. We believed in something called individual choice. We thought each Krell could become anything they wished. This belief led to chaos. Warriors wanted to be scholars. Scholars wanted to be warriors. No one was content with their natural abilities." The professor's 4 arms gestured at the hologram, which now showed images of destroyed cities and burned fields. "It was only when we developed genetic analysis that we found the truth. Each Krell is born with a genetic code that determines their best path in life. Some have the genes of warriors. Others have the genes of teachers, or farmers, or builders. When we stopped fighting our nature and accepted what we were meant to be." Around the lecture hall, Alien students made various sounds and gestures that Jake had learned meant agreement. The crystal Vex Ari next to him hummed softly. The large creature on his other side nodded two of its heads. Professor Velnoth brought up more examples. The Sil Moon, beings that glowed with soft light and seemed to float rather than walk, had found peace when they stopped believing in free will. The Drex, small furry creatures with 6 legs, had reached the stars only after accepting that their lives were guided by forces beyond their control. You see the pattern, the professor said. Every successful civilization in the galaxy has learned the same lesson. The universe has an order. We are all part of that order. Fighting against it only brings suffering. Accepting it brings peace and progress. Jake wrote faster, trying to keep up. Something about this bothered him, but he could not quite figure out what it was. The examples were clear. The evidence seemed strong. Every species that had succeeded had given up the idea that individuals could choose their own path. Now, Professor Velnoth said, and his voice took on a different tone, let us discuss the human question. Jake's head snapped up from his tablet. Several alien students turned to look at him and the other 2 humans in the room. Humanity presents us with an interesting puzzle, the professor continued. They have achieved faster than light travel. They have built impressive technology. They have ended wars on their own world and come together as a species. And yet, they still believe in something they call free will. They still think individuals can choose their own destiny. They still resist the idea of accepting their natural place in the order of things. The professor pulled up images of Earth, cities gleaming with lights, ships moving through space, humans working, playing, building. How is this possible? He asked the class. Based on everything we know, humanity should have destroyed itself by now. Or, at the very least, they should still be trapped on their home world, fighting endless wars over who gets to choose what path their life takes. This is the human question. How long can they maintain this contradiction? How long before they either evolve past these primitive ideas or face the collapse that such beliefs always bring? The professor looked directly at Jake, though his expression was not unkind. It was the look of a scientist studying something curious and strange. I invite you all to consider this puzzle, Professor Velnoth said. Perhaps humans represent a late stage of development, still clinging to juvenile philosophy. Or perhaps there is something we have not yet understood. Either way, they provide us with a fascinating case study in how species evolve toward mature understanding. Jake felt his face grow hot. The professor was not trying to be insulting. His tone was academic, almost gentle. But somehow that made it worse. To be discussed like an interesting animal at the zoo. To have his entire species treated as a philosophical problem that needed solving. He looked down at his notes. The words blurred together on his screen. A Sil Moon student near the front of the room began to speak. The being's body pulsed with soft blue light as it talked, and Jake's translator turned the light patterns into words. Perhaps humans are similar to young Sil Moon, the glowing creature said. Before we reached maturity, we also believed we controlled our own paths. We fought against the natural currents of our biology. It took us 2,000 years to understand that we were simply following patterns set at our birth. Humans have only been in space for a short time. Maybe they need more time to reach this understanding. Several students made sounds of agreement. Professor Velnoth nodded, with 2 of his heads. A Drex spoke next, its small furry body standing on the desk to be seen. But humans are violent. We have studied their history. They have had hundreds of wars. They still have crime on their world. This is what happens when a species believes in individual choice. Each person thinks they can do whatever they want. This creates chaos. Creates chaos. Jake felt his jaw tighten. The Drex was not completely wrong. Human history was full of violence. But it was more complicated than that. A tall Krell student, younger than Professor Velnoth but still impressive in size, raised one hand. I have met humans at this institute, she said. They seem intelligent and kind. But I have noticed something strange. They ask many questions about things that are already understood. Why would they question established truth unless their minds are still in a primitive state? The professor gestured for more comments. A being that looked like it was made of flowing water, held in place by some invisible container, spoke in bubbling sounds. I propose that humans might destroy themselves within the next 100 years. No species can maintain such internal contradiction for long. They will either accept determinism and find peace, or their belief in free will tear their civilization apart. The evidence from all other species supports this conclusion. Jake's hands gripped the edge of his desk. He wanted to say something, but what could he say? These beings had centuries, or millennia, of recorded history. Their civilizations were older than anything on Earth. They had evidence and examples and data. All he had was a feeling that something was wrong with their reasoning. Professor Velnoth pulled up a new hologram. It showed a chart with lines and numbers that Jake struggled to understand. This displays the correlation between philosophical acceptance and technological advancement. The professor explained. You can see clearly that every species shown here achieved space travel only after moving past the belief in individual agency. The pattern is consistent across 12 different civilizations, spanning 3,000 years of data. The professor pointed to a specific part of the chart. Humanity sits here, as an outlier. They have the technology, without the philosophical foundation, that normally supports it. This is why they are such an interesting case study. More students spoke. Each one offered a theory about humans. Some were sympathetic, comparing humans to children who would eventually grow up and understand. Others were more critical, suggesting that humans were dangerous because of their beliefs. A few wondered if humans might be fundamentally different in some way that science had not yet discovered. Through it all, Jake sat quietly. Lisa caught his eye from across the room and gave him a small, worried look. She could probably see that he was upset. The discussion went on for another 20 minutes. Jake heard his species analyzed and discussed as if humans were not sitting right there in the room. Finally, he could not stay silent anymore. He raised his hand. The movement was small, but Professor Velnoth noticed immediately. The old Krell's eyes focused on Jake, and a strange expression crossed his face. Interest, maybe. Or curiosity. Yes, Jake Morrison, the professor said. Please, share your thoughts. It would be valuable to hear a human perspective on the human question. The entire lecture hall turned to look at him. 200 pairs of eyes, or eye equivalents, focused on the young man from Earth. Jake stood up slowly. His legs felt shaky, but he forced them to hold steady. Thank you, Professor, Jake said. His voice sounded small in the large room, but the translation system carried it to everyone. I have been listening carefully to everything you and the other students have said. I am still learning about galactic philosophy, and I respect the knowledge and experience everyone here has. He paused, gathering his thoughts. He needed to phrase this carefully. I have a question, Jake continued. It is about something you said earlier, and something that seems to be at the foundation of the universal ethics doctrine. Professor Velnoth gestured for him to continue. The room was completely silent now. Even the water beings seemed to be still. You explained that all of us are guided by forces beyond our control, Jake said. Our genetics, our environment, our place in the cosmic order. You said that the Vex Ari were always going to accept their social structure because that is what they were meant to do. You said the Krell were always going to discover genetic determinism and follow it. Every species, you said, follows a predetermined path. Several students nodded. This was basic philosophy, something every educated being in the galaxy understood. Jake took a breath. My question is this. If everything is predetermined, if none of us actually have any choice in what we believe or what we do, then who decided that this philosophy is true? Confusion rippled through the room. The crystal Vexari next to Jake stopped refracting light. The large Krell student stopped moving entirely. Jake kept going, his words coming faster now. If the Vex Ari had no choice but to accept their social order, then how can we call that decision wise or evolved? They did not choose it. It just happened to them. If the Krell had no choice but to follow their genetic code, then how can we praise them for that decision? They were always going to do it. They could not have done anything else. There are Kols. Professor Velnoth opened his mouth, but no sound came out. And if humans are wrong about free will, Jake said, his voice stronger now, then we were always going to be wrong about it. We had no choice. So how can you call our belief primitive or juvenile? We could not believe anything else, because everything is predetermined. The lecture hall was so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. He looked around at the alien faces staring at him, trying to process what he had said. But here is the bigger question, Jake continued. If we have no choice in what we believe, why are you teaching us anything at all? Teaching assumes that we can learn. Learning assumes that our minds can change. Change assumes that we have some ability to become different than we were. But if everything is predetermined, then I was always going to believe what I believe, and teaching me will not change that. So why have schools? Why have this lecture? Why try to convince anyone of anything if they have no choice in whether to be convinced? He sat down. His hands were shaking now, and he hid them under the desk. Professor Velnoth stood frozen on the stage, all four arms hanging motionless at his sides. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. The Sil moon who had spoken earlier flickered through several colors rapidly, its light pulsing in patterns that Jake's translator could not keep up with. The small Drex made a high-pitched sound that might have been distress. The water being's form collapsed slightly, as if its container had weakened. Jake had not meant to cause such a reaction. He had just asked a question, the same way he might have asked a question in a philosophy class back on Earth. But looking around the room now, he realized he had done something more than that. He had pointed out a hole in the foundation of everything these beings believed. If determinism was true, then the belief in determinism could not be claimed as a rational choice or an intellectual achievement. It was just another predetermined outcome, no better or worse than any other belief. And if determinism was true, then teaching it to others was pointless, because they would either believe it or not believe it based on factors outside anyone's control. But they did teach it. They had schools and lectures and discussions, which meant they believed, on some level, that minds could change, that learning mattered, that choices existed. Professor Velnoth finally found his voice. It came out rough and uncertain, nothing like his usual confident tone. That is a very interesting question, Jake Morrison, he said slowly. I need D. The cafeteria was crowded when Jake, Lisa, and Ben arrived for lunch. The massive room served food for dozens of different species, each with their own dietary needs. The air smelled strange, a mixture of scents that human noses were not designed to process together. Jake had gotten used to it over the past 5 months, but today the smell made his stomach turn. They found an empty table near a window that looked out over the campus. The Galactic Institute spread across several miles of carefully maintained grounds. Buildings of different designs housed students from across the known galaxy. In the distance, ships came and went from the spaceport, carrying supplies and new arrivals. Everyone is staring at you, Lisa said quietly. She picked at her food, something the cafeteria staff tried to make taste like Earth food but never quite got right. Jake looked around. She was right. Alien students at nearby tables kept glancing his way, then quickly looking away when he noticed. The whispers were constant, though his translator could not pick out individual words at this distance. What did you expect? Ben said. He was eating more confidently than Lisa, having decided weeks ago that complaining about alien food was pointless. You just questioned the foundation of their entire civilization. I just asked a question, Jake said. But even as he said it, he knew it was more than that. The looks on the faces of Professor Velnoth and the other students kept replaying in his mind. The silence in the lecture hall, The way the Vexari had stopped glowing. The way the professor had dismissed class early for the first time in his 300-year teaching career. It was a good question, Lisa said. She was studying to be a doctor, but she had always been interested in philosophy too. I have been thinking about it since we left class. They claim everything is predetermined, but then they act like their belief in determinism is somehow better than other beliefs. They cannot have it both ways. A shadow fell across their table. Jake looked up to see 3 alien students standing there. One was a Krell, though smaller than Professor Velnoth. The second was a Vexari, its crystal body shifting through pale colors. The third was a species Jake had not met before, something that looked like a collection of floating geometric shapes held together by energy fields. "May we sit?" the Krell asked. His voice was high-pitched for his species, and he seemed young, maybe the equivalent of a college student on Earth. Jake nodded, gesturing to the empty seats. The 3 aliens sat down, arranging themselves carefully, the geometric being floated above its chair, rather than sitting on it. "I am called Krent," the Krell said. He pointed to the others. "This is Velix and Zorn. We were in the lecture hall today." An uncomfortable silence stretched out. Jake waited for them to explain why they were here. Finally, Velix the Vexari spoke, its voice coming through Jake's translator as a soft chime. "Your question disturbed me deeply. I have been unable to stop thinking about it. I am sorry," Jake started to say. But Velix held up something that might have been a hand. "Do not apologize. Disturbance is not always bad. My people have a saying. Still water reflects nothing but itself. You created ripples." Zorn, the geometric being, pulsed with different colors as it spoke. "I teach younger students in my spare time. I have done this for 3 years now. But after your question, I realized I do not know why I teach. If my students will learn what they will learn, regardless of my efforts, then what is the point? But I know that good teaching matters. I have seen students improve under good teachers and fail under bad ones. How can both things be true?" Krent tapped his claws on the table, a nervous gesture. "I chose to study engineering. I could have studied many other things, but I chose this path because it interested me. At least, that is what I thought. But according to everything I have been taught, I did not choose anything. My genetics and environment chose for me. So why does it feel like I made a choice? Why does it feel like I could have picked something else?" The 3 aliens looked at Jake as if he might have answers, but he was just as confused as they were. "I do not have solutions," Jake said honestly. "On Earth, people have argued about free will and determinism for thousands of years. We still do not agree. Some humans believe everything is predetermined. Others believe we have complete freedom. Most people fall somewhere in the middle." "What do you believe?" Velix asked. Jake thought about it carefully. "I think both things are partly true. I know that my biology affects me. I know my environment shaped who I am. I did not choose where I was born, or who my parents were. But I also know that I make choices every day. Small ones, mostly. What to eat, what to study, what to say. Maybe those choices are influenced by a million factors I cannot control, but they still feel like choices. And I think that matters." "But that is a contradiction," Krent said. "How can you be both determined and free?" "Maybe the universe is full of contradictions," Lisa offered. "Maybe trying to force everything into one simple explanation is the mistake." Ben had been quiet, but now he leaned forward. "Here is what I do not understand. Every species in the galaxy believes in determinism, right? And they all reached this conclusion independently. Does that not suggest they are right? I mean, if everyone agrees? Maybe there is a reason. Or maybe," Zorn said slowly, its geometric shapes rotating thoughtfully, "there is a reason why determinism is comfortable to believe. If I believe I have no choice in what I do, then I am not responsible when things go wrong. If my society is structured unfairly, I do not need to feel bad about it, because the structure was predetermined. If I am unhappy with my life, it is not my fault. There is freedom in accepting that you are not free. That brought another silence. Jake had not thought about it that way. But Zorn had a point. Determinism was comforting. It meant you could stop struggling, stop questioning, stop trying to change things. Just accept your place and be at peace. But humans did not seem built for that kind of peace. I need to tell you something, Krent said, looking around nervously, as if worried someone might overhear. Professor Velnoth canceled his next 3 lectures. I have never heard of him doing that before. And he is not the only one. Professors across the institute are rescheduling classes. My ethics professor sent out a message saying she needs time to reconsider her curriculum. Why? Jake asked. Because of you. Velik said simply. Because of your question. It is spreading. Students are talking about it. Some professors are angry. They say you are disrupting important education with primitive philosophy. But others are troubled. They are realizing that they have been teaching something without ever truly examining its foundations. Zorn pulsed a deep blue color. The philosophy department held an emergency meeting this morning. My advisor attended. She said the department head called your question the most significant philosophical challenge in 500 years. Jake felt dizzy. He had just asked a simple question in class. How had it become this big? What happens now? Lisa asked, voicing what they were all wondering. I do not know, Krent admitted. But change is coming. I can feel it. The Galactic Institute has been stable for centuries. We teach the same ideas, year after year. Students learn them, graduate, and go on to teach the same ideas to the next generation. But stability can become stagnation. Maybe we needed someone to ask the uncomfortable questions. A group of students at a nearby table suddenly stood up and left. But not before one of them glared at Jake. The hostility in the look was clear, even across species. Not everyone is happy about this, Velik said quietly. Some students feel you are attacking their beliefs. Some professors think you are dangerous. They say humans are destabilizing galactic society with your chaotic philosophy. I am not trying to destabilize anything, Jake protested. I just asked one question. One question can be more powerful than 1,000 arguments, Zorn said. Questions open doors. Arguments try to close them. Ben checked his tablet. We have another class in 30 minutes. Applied physics. Do you think people will still be talking about this there? People will be talking about this everywhere, Krent said. Word travels fast at the institute. By tomorrow, every student on campus will know what happened. By next week, other schools will hear about it. By next month. He trailed off, shaking his head. I do not know. This could spread across the entire galaxy. The idea seemed impossible to Jake. He was just one student. His question had been simple, almost obvious once you thought about it. How could something so small cause such big reactions? But looking at the troubled faces of the 3 alien students sitting with him, seeing the whispers and glances from across the cafeteria, he started to understand. Sometimes the most obvious questions are the ones no one thinks to ask. And sometimes those questions reveal that the Emperor has no clothes, that the foundation everyone trusted is not as solid as they believed. They finished lunch in relative quiet, discussing smaller things, classes and homework and campus gossip. But the weight of what had happened in the lecture hall hung over all of them. As they got up to leave, Velix turned to Jake one more time. Do not apologize for your question. Whatever happens next, you gave us something important. You gave us doubt. And doubt is the first step toward actually understanding anything. Jake nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They separated in the hallway outside the cafeteria, heading to different classes. In applied physics, Jake tried to focus on the lesson about quantum field manipulation. But he could see other students watching him. Some looked curious. Others looked angry. A few looked scared, as if Jake had revealed something they wished had stayed hidden. When class ended, the professor, an elderly Silmoon named Corven, asked Jake to stay behind. The other students filed out, leaving Jake alone with the glowing being. "I heard about what happened in Professor Velnoth's class," Corven said. Its light pulsed in patterns that Jake's translator rendered as gentle concern. "I want you to know that not everyone sees your question as a threat. Some of us have wondered about these things for years, but lacked the courage to speak up." Quote, "You have?" Jake asked, surprised. The leader of the group was a Krell, larger than Krent, and with darker scales that suggested age. Behind him stood 5 other students from various species, all watching Jake with expressions that ranged from anger to disgust. "You are Jake Morrison," the Krell said. It was not a question. "Yes," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. His heart was beating fast, but he tried not to show fear. "My name is Grath. I am a senior student studying social philosophy. I have been at this institute for 6 years. Do you know what I learned in those 6 years?" Jake shook his head. "I learned peace," Grath said. "I learned how to accept my place in the universe. I learned how to stop struggling against forces I cannot control. Before I came here, I was angry all the time. I hated my life. I hated my limitations. The universal ethics doctrine freed me from that suffering." "That is good," Jake said carefully. "I am glad you found peace. But now you are taking it away," one of the other students said, a small, furry being that reminded Jake of the Drex from class. "You are making us doubt. You are putting questions in our minds that will not go away. Why? What gives you the right to disrupt the peace we have found?" Jake looked at each of them in turn. They were not here to hurt him, he realized. They were here because they were scared. Scared that the foundation they had built their lives on might crack. "I did not mean to take anything from you," Jake said honestly. "I asked a question in class because I was confused. That is all. You can still believe whatever brings you peace." "But we cannot," Grath said, frustration clear in his voice. "Do you not understand? Once the question is asked, we cannot unask it. Once we see the contradiction, we cannot unsee it. You opened a door that should have stayed closed." "Why should it stay closed?" Jake asked. "If your belief is true, then my question should not threaten it." "Not all truths need to be examined," a Vexari student said. Its crystal body was dark, almost cloudy. "Some truths are meant to be accepted, not analyzed. You humans do not understand this because you are young. You think everything must be taken apart and studied. But some things work better when left whole." Jake thought about that. Maybe they had a point. Not every belief needed to be questioned. Sometimes, acceptance was okay. But something still felt wrong about it. "If your belief cannot survive one question from one student," Jake said slowly, "then maybe it was not as strong as you thought." Grath stepped closer, and Jake fought the urge to step back. The Krell was large and intimidating, but Jake forced himself to stand his ground. "You are dangerous," Grath said quietly. "Not because you are violent, not because you are cruel, but because you spread doubt. Doubt is a poison. It destroys stability. It tears apart the order that keeps society functioning. Your species does not understand this yet because you are still in chaos. But one day you will learn. One day you will understand why the rest of us chose peace over endless questioning." The group walked away, leaving Jake standing alone in the corridor. His hands were shaking now. He continued to his dormitory, a building designed to house students who breathed oxygen and lived at Earth-like temperatures. His room was small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a window looking out over the campus. Pictures from Earth hung on the walls. His family, his friends, from home. Reminders of a world that felt very far away right now. He sat on his bed and put his head in his hands. What had he done? He had come to the Galactic Institute to learn, to experience alien cultures, to represent humanity well. Instead, he had started some kind of philosophical crisis that was spreading across campus. A message appeared on his tablet. It was from the Office of Academic Affairs. They wanted to see him tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. The message did not say why, but Jake could guess. He spent the evening trying to study, but his mind would not focus. His other classes seemed pointless now. How could he care about chemistry equations when he had apparently shaken the foundation of galactic philosophy? Around midnight, another message came through. This one was from Professor Velnoth, asking Jake to come to his office the next morning before the meeting with Academic Affairs. Jake sent back a confirmation, then tried to sleep. Sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, Jake dreamed of being back on Earth, sitting in a normal classroom with human students and human teachers, discussing philosophy in ways that felt comfortable and familiar. He woke early and got ready. The morning was quiet as he walked across campus to Professor Velnoth's office. The twin suns of Caraxes Prime were just rising, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange that Earth skies never showed. Professor Velnoth's office was in the oldest building on campus, a structure built 300 years ago when the institute first opened. The hallways were lined with pictures of famous teachers and important discoveries. Jake felt small walking past centuries of academic achievement. The professor's door was open. Jake knocked anyway. "Come in, Jake Morrison." Professor Velnoth's deep voice called out. The office was larger than Jake expected, with walls covered in books and strange devices whose purpose Jake could not guess. Professor Velnoth sat behind a massive desk, but he did not look as imposing as usual. His scales seemed duller. His forearms moved slowly, as if he was very tired. "Sit, please," the professor said, gesturing to a chair that had been adjusted for human size. Jake sat. Silence filled the room for a long moment. "I have been teaching for 312 years, Professor Velnoth finally said. "I have taught thousands of students from dozens of species. I have written 17 books on ethics and philosophy. I am considered an expert in my field. People across the galaxy know my name." He paused, looking directly at Jake with his small, intelligent eyes. "And in all those years, with all that experience, not one student ever asked me the question you asked. I am sorry if I caused problems," Jake started to say. "Do not apologize," the professor interrupted. "That is not why I asked you here. I asked you here because I need to tell you something. Something I have never admitted to anyone. Not even myself, until now." The old Krell stood and walked to the window, looking out over the campus with his back to Jake. "Your question broke something in me," he said quietly. "It revealed a crack I had always known was there, but chose to ignore. You see, I teach that all choices are predetermined. I teach that we have no control over our beliefs or actions. But then I spend hours preparing lectures, trying to find the best way to explain concepts to students. Why would I do that if they will understand or not understand, based on factors outside my control?" He turned back to face Jake. "I grade papers carefully, giving feedback to help students improve. But if students cannot choose to improve, if their learning is predetermined, then my feedback is meaningless. Yet, I keep doing it. Every professor here keeps doing it. We all act as if our efforts matter, as if student choices are real, even while teaching that they are not." Professor Velnoth returned to his desk and sat heavily. "I punish students for cheating. I praise students for hard work. I felt proud when my students succeeded, and disappointed when they failed. But none of those reactions make sense if determinism is true. How can I punish someone for something they could not help doing? How can I praise someone for something they had no choice about?" Jake listened, hardly daring to breathe. "The truth, Jake Morrison, is that I have always acted as if free will exists, even while teaching that it does not. I suspect every teacher here has done the same. We have all lived inside this contradiction for so long that we stopped seeing it, until you pointed it out." "What does this mean?" Jake asked. The professor's expression was hard to read, but Jake thought he saw something like relief in those alien eyes. "It means we have been wrong. Not completely wrong. Determinism is partly true. We are influenced by genetics and environment, and countless factors beyond our control. But the universal ethics doctrine took a partial truth and made it absolute. We decided that because we are not completely free, we must not be free at all. We threw out the nuance, because the simple answer was easier to teach. Professor Velnoth pulled up a hologram, but this time it was not a chart or graph. It was a message board, filled with text scrolling by too fast to read. "Do you know what this is?" the professor asked. Jake shook his head. "This is a philosophy forum used by academics across the galaxy. In the past 3 days, since your question, there have been over 10,000 new posts. Professors from 20 different species, all discussing the contradiction you identified. Some are angry. Some are defensive. But many are admitting what I just admitted to you. We have been teaching a philosophy that we do not actually live by." The professor closed the hologram. "You will be called to meet with academic affairs this morning. They will likely ask you to stop discussing this topic. Some powerful people are very upset about the disruption you have caused. But I wanted you to know something before that meeting." He leaned forward, his voice serious. "You did nothing wrong. You asked an honest question. You pointed out a real problem. Do not let anyone make you feel bad for that." The ability to ask uncomfortable questions. Jake walked toward the crowd slowly, not quite believing what he was seeing. Students from across the galaxy, beings who had never questioned their most basic beliefs, were now standing together in peaceful protest. "What is this?" Jake asked when he reached Krent. "This is a demonstration," the young Krell explained. "We are showing the administration that we want change. We want classes that teach us to think, not just to accept. We want to explore ideas, even uncomfortable ones." A Sil moon floated forward, its body pulsing with determined light. "My name is Lyra. I study medicine. Your question made me realize something. If I truly believed all outcomes are predetermined, I would not work so hard to save patients. I would just accept that some will live and some will die based on factors I cannot control. But I do not accept that. I fight for every patient because I believe my choices matter." More students came forward, each sharing their story. An engineer who realized that innovation requires believing change is possible. An artist who understood that creating something new means choosing between options. A politician in training who saw that governing only makes sense if leaders can actually make decisions that alter outcomes. "We have been living a contradiction," Velix said, its crystal body glowing brightly. "We have been taught one thing, but living another. You helped us see that. Now we want to understand why. We want to explore the space between complete determinism and complete freedom. We want to find the truth, even if it is complicated." Jake felt overwhelmed. "I just asked a question. You are all doing the hard part. Questions start revolutions," Zorn said, its geometric shapes rotating, in what Jake had learned was a sign of excitement. "Now we need to see where this revolution leads." A door to the administration building opened, and official-looking being emerged. It was a species Jake had not encountered before, something that looked like a tall pillar of shifting smoke held in a vaguely humanoid shape. "Jake Morrison," the being said, its voice like wind through hollow tubes. "The Council of Academic Affairs is ready to see you." Jake looked back at the crowd of students. They nodded encouragement. He took a deep breath and followed the official inside. The council chamber was designed to accommodate many species. The room had multiple levels, different atmospheric conditions for different areas, and translation technology that hummed quietly in the background. 7 beings sat in elevated positions around the circular room, representing different species and academic departments. The smoke being gestured to a platform in the center. Jake stepped onto it, feeling very small and very alone. Jake Morrison, one of the council members, began. She was a Krell, even larger than Professor Velnoth, with ceremonial markings on her scales. I am Chancellor Vortek. We have called you here to discuss the disruption you have caused on our campus. Jake's mouth went dry, but he managed to speak. I understand, Chancellor. Another council member, a Vex Ari whose crystal body was streaked with gold, spoke next. In the span of 3 days, you have called into question philosophical principles that have guided our civilizations for millennia. Classes have been cancelled. Professors are refusing to teach their normal curriculum. Students are protesting. This is unprecedented in the history of this institution. I did not intend to cause disruption, Jake said carefully. I asked a question in class because I was confused about a logical problem. That is all. That is all? A third council member asked. This one was a being made of what looked like living metal, its form constantly shifting. A simple question has brought academic work to a halt across multiple departments. Research projects have been abandoned. Long-held beliefs are being challenged. This is not a small thing, Jake Morrison. Jake felt panic rising. Were they going to expel him? Send him back to Earth in disgrace? He had come here to learn, not to destroy. Chancellor Vortek raised one hand, and the room fell silent. However, she said slowly, we did not call you here to punish you. Jake looked up, surprised. We called you here because we need to understand what happened, the Chancellor continued. The Galactic Institute has existed for 300 years. Millions of students have passed through our halls. Many of them were intelligent. Many asked difficult questions. But no one ever identified the contradiction you identified. Why? Why? Jake thought about it. Maybe because everyone here was taught the same philosophy from childhood. It is hard to question something everyone agrees on. I came from outside the system. I saw it with fresh eyes. The Vex Ari council member leaned forward. And what do your fresh eyes see? Ah, I see beings who teach that choice does not exist, but who act every day as if it does, Jake said, gaining confidence. I see a philosophy that brings peace, but also brings stagnation. I see civilizations that stopped growing because they stopped believing growth was possible. You think we have stagnated? The metal being asked, a sharp edge to its voice. Professor Velnoth told our class that no major innovations have occurred in 500 years, Jake replied. He said it like it was a good thing. Like stability was more important than progress. But on Earth, we have a saying. If you are not growing, you are dying. Growth causes conflict, Chancellor Vortek said. For a millennium before the universal ethics doctrine, the galaxy was torn by wars. Species fought over resources, territory, ideological differences. The doctrine brought peace. But at what cost? Jake asked. You have peace, yes. But do you have purpose? Do you have passion? Do you have the drive to become better than you are? The council members looked at each other. Some of their expressions showed agreement. Others showed resistance. A seventh council member spoke for the first time. It was a sill moon, ancient by the look of its fading light. I have been on this council for 160 years. In that time, I have seen the Institute train thousands of excellent students. They learn well. They graduate. They take jobs in their predetermined fields. They live good lives. But I wonder, when was the last time one of them surprised me? When was the last time a student did something completely unexpected? The old being's light pulsed sadly. We have traded wonder for certainty. We have traded possibility for peace. Perhaps it was a fair trade. Perhaps not. But Jake Morrison has shown us that we made a choice, whether we admit it or not. And if we made one choice, we can make others. Chancellor Vortek was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke again, her voice thoughtful. Jake Morrison, you have caused a great disruption. You have challenged beliefs that form the foundation of galactic society. Normally, this would result in serious consequences. But these are not normal circumstances. She paused, looking around at the other council members. The truth is, many of us have had doubts for years. We have seen the stagnation. We have felt the lack of progress. We have wondered if peace was worth the price of passivity. But we did not speak up, because questioning the universal ethics doctrine seemed impossible. You made it possible by simply asking an honest question. Another council member nodded. The question is now asked. We cannot unask it. We must decide how to respond. What we need, the metal being said slowly, as if the words were difficult, is a new way forward. Not a return to the chaos of the old days, but not continuation of complete stagnation either. We need to find balance between order and growth, between acceptance and ambition. And who better to help us find that balance, the ancient Silmoon said, than a species that lives in the tension between determinism and free will, a species that somehow maintains both scientific understanding and personal responsibility? The humans may have something to teach us, after all. Chancellor Vortex stood, and the other council members followed. Jake Morrison, we are not punishing you. Instead, we are asking for your help. We want to create a new program here at the Galactic Institute. A program that explores different philosophical perspectives, that teaches students to question, rather than just to accept, that prepares them to navigate uncertainty, instead of demanding certainty. Jake stared at her. You want me to help create this program? You and other humans? Yes, the Chancellor said. Along with professors from our own species who are willing to rethink their assumptions. We are calling it the Human Philosophical Perspectives Initiative. But I am just a student, Jake protested. I do not have the knowledge or experience to teach anyone. You have exactly what we need, the Vexari council member said. You have the ability to see contradictions we have become blind to. You have the courage to ask uncomfortable questions, and you have demonstrated that philosophy is not about having all the answers, but about asking better questions. What would this program involve? Jake asked. Classes, seminars, discussions, Chancellor Vortek explained. We would start small. A few pilot courses next term. If they work well, we expand. Eventually, we hope to change how philosophy is taught across the Institute. And perhaps, in time, across the galaxy. The metal being spoke again. This will not be easy. Many will resist. There are powerful forces in galactic society who benefit from stability and fear change. You have already seen the protests against you. There will be more. But there are also many who hunger for something more, the ancient Silmoon added. You saw them in the courtyard. They are ready for new ideas. They are ready to grow. Jake thought about his family back on Earth. They had been so proud when he was accepted to the Galactic Institute. His parents had dreamed their whole lives of humanity being accepted among the stars. And now he had a chance to represent humanity in a profound way, not through military might or technological advancement, but through ideas. I will do it, Jake said. But I will need help. My friends Lisa and Ben should be involved. And we should include students from other species who are ready to think differently. Agreed, Chancellor Vortex said. Assemble your team. Work with Professor Velnoth and other interested faculty. Design a curriculum that challenges without destroying, that questions without dismissing, that seeks truth wherever it may lead. The council dismissed Jake, and he walked out of the chamber in a daze. In the span of 3 days, he had gone from an anonymous student to someone tasked with changing how an entire galaxy thought about philosophy. The crowd in the courtyard was still there, larger now. When Jake emerged from the building, they erupted in cheers and sounds of approval from dozens of different species. He held up his hands for quiet and explained what had happened inside. More cheers followed. Students surged forward, wanting to be part of the new program, wanting to learn this different way of thinking. Lisa and Ben pushed through the crowd to reach him. Are you insane? Ben asked. But he was grinning. We came here to study, and now we are supposed to teach the galaxy how to think? Not teach them how to think, Jake corrected. Teach them that it is okay to not have all the answers. That uncertainty is not weakness. That questions matter as much as answers. Lisa hugged him. Earth is going to lose its mind when they hear about this. If it works, Jake said. If we can actually pull this off, it will work, Velix said, floating closer. Because it has to. The galaxy has been standing still for too long. We need to move forward. Even if we do not know exactly where we are going. Professor Velnoth appeared at the edge of the crowd. He nodded to Jake, a gesture of respect between teacher and student, between old wisdom and new ideas. Over the next few weeks, the planning began. Jake, Lisa, and Ben worked with Professor Velnoth and a dozen other professors who were ready to try something different. They designed classes that focused on discussion rather than lecture, on questions rather than answers, on exploration rather than acceptance. The first class of the Human Philosophical Perspectives Initiative was held in the same lecture hall where Jake had asked his question. Over 300 students showed up, far more than the room could hold. They squeezed in anyway, sitting in aisles and standing in the back, all of them eager to learn this new way of thinking. Jake stood at the front, nervous but determined. Lisa and Ben stood beside him. Professor Velnoth sat in the front row, a student once again. Welcome, Jake began. We are not here to give you answers. We are here to teach you how to live with questions. We are here to show you that doubt is not the opposite of faith, but a different kind of faith. Faith that the truth can survive examination. Faith that we can change and grow. Faith that the future is not written, but waiting to be created. He paused, looking around at the crowd of alien faces, all of them watching him intently. A few weeks ago, I asked a question that challenged what you believed. Today, I ask you to do the same. Not to destroy your beliefs, but to test them, to see if they are strong enough to survive scrutiny. Because if they are not, then they were never worth believing in the first place. The class began. Questions flew back and forth. Ideas clashed and merged. Some students left confused, others left excited. All of them left thinking, and across the galaxy, word spread. The humans had asked a question that stunned a lecture hall. Now they were teaching the galaxy how to live with uncertainty, how to embrace growth, how to move forward into an unknown future with courage rather than fear. The revolution had begun, not with weapons or conquest, but with the most powerful tool humanity had ever developed, the ability to ask, what if, and why, and what comes next. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the stars. Not the answer to the human question, but the question itself. It's not a weakness of your species, Jake Morrison. It is a strength, perhaps the most important strength any intelligent being can have. Jake felt emotion rising in his throat. Thank you, Professor. No, the old Krell said. Thank you. You reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place. Not to give students answers, but to help them ask better questions. Jake left the office feeling slightly less worried about the upcoming meeting. But as he walked toward the administration building, he saw something that made him stop. Students were gathering in the main courtyard, hundreds of them, from dozens of different species. They were not violent or angry. They were simply standing together, holding signs and displays written in various languages. Jake got closer, and his translator started working on the signs. Question. Everything. Truth fears. No inquiry. Determinism. Cannot determine itself. In the center of the crowd stood Krent, Velix, and Zorn, along with other students Jake recognized from various classes. They saw him and waved him over. The Sil Moon reached philosophical enlightenment 2,000 years ago, Corvin said. Or, so we are taught. But I have always wondered, if we truly accepted determinism, why do we still punish criminals? Why do we still praise heroes? Why do we celebrate achievements? If no one chooses their actions, then what is there to praise or punish? The professor floated closer. You asked the question out loud that many of us have whispered to ourselves in private. Now, we cannot ignore it anymore. Now, we must find answers, or admit we do not have them. Jake left the classroom feeling even more confused than before. He had expected anger from the teachers, maybe punishment for disrupting class. Instead, he was finding allies in unexpected places, but he was also finding enemies. As he walked back to his dormitory, a group of students blocked his path. They were not aggressive, but their body language was clear. They were not happy. Oh, think about it more carefully before I can provide a proper answer. He looked around at his students, saw their confused and troubled faces, and made a decision. Class is dismissed, he said. Early. I apologize, but I need to consider what has been asked here today. Please review chapters 12 and 13 for next time. Students began to file out of the lecture hall in unusual silence. No one spoke. The normal chatter and discussion that followed every class was absent. Aliens moved slowly toward the exits, their various forms of body language all showing the same thing. Deep confusion. Jake gathered his tablet and stood up. His legs still felt weak. Lisa and Ben pushed through the crowd to reach him. What did you just do? Ben asked, his eyes wide. Jake shook his head. I do not know. I just asked a question. Lisa looked back at the stage where Professor Velnoth still stood, motionless. I think you did more than that, she said quietly. I think you just broke something. Around him, alien students began to discuss the human question in quiet voices. Jake heard fragments through his translator. Theories about human development. Predictions about how long Earth's civilization would last. Comparisons to the early stages of other species before they learned the truth. Professor Velnoth raised one of his hands, and the classroom fell silent. Let us open the floor for discussion, he said. Who would like to share their thoughts on the human question? Several hands and appendages rose into the air.